Welcome to the Growth Lab, a trusted space for parents navigating their child's developmental journey. I'm Luba, a speech-language pathologist, myofunction therapist, child and family advocate, and a mom of three. For the last 15 years, I've worked with more than 150,000 children and their families, helping parents understand what they're seeing, what it means, and how to move forward with confidence. This podcast is for parents who want clear, credible guidance when information feels overwhelming or decisions feel heavy. Here, we break down speech, feeding, breathing, learning differences, attention, IEPs, and more in practical, easy to understand ways alongside trusted experts. My goal is simple, and it's to help you feel informed, supported, and confident as you advocate for your child. You're in the right place, so let's begin. Welcome back to the Growth Lab podcast. I'm Luba, a mom of three, a bilingual SLP, and a fierce advocate for families who just want answers, clarity, and support. And today, we're talking about something I see every single day across my clinics and in the families that I serve. There are early behaviors in children at home or in school that quietly tell you, hey, I need a little more help. If this resonates with you, tune in because we're about to dive deep into what to look for. Kids don't always use their words to communicate their needs, or they can't use their words to communicate their needs. Sometimes it's shown in their behavior, their play, their reactions, the patterns that they're communicating with, all of these little cues that parents and teachers are noticing, but aren't sure what they might mean. And if you're listening to this as a parent, a caregiver, a teacher, or even a therapist, I want you to hear this with your full heart. There is nothing wrong with your child. There is nothing wrong with you. There is only more to understand. And that's where I come in. Kids are communicating through behavior, and they do that long before they can communicate through language. So when a child is struggling, whether it's with speech or sensory or emotional regulation, with their feeding, motor skills, you're going to see it before you hear it. And I always say this as a mom and a speech-language pathologist, that behavior is communication. It's your data, and it's a window. And when families are coming to my business Kidology, they usually start by saying something like, well, I don't know if this is a big deal, or my gut is telling me that something's going on. So, honey, you're right. Your gut is data too. Your gut is the insight, and your gut is your child's early warning system. So you are listening to the correct cues. There are everyday behaviors that are actually red flags. So here's what you want to look out for. I'm going to walk you through the signs that I see all the time. The signs that don't always get flagged in daycare or school, but they mean so much when you look at the full developmental picture. So firstly, limited speech or delayed communication. If a child is not using words when their peers are, or they're repeating phrases, maybe like at the end of the sentence. So if, you greet a child and you say, hey, Susie, how are you? And she responds, you, or how are you? This child could be presenting with a gestalt processing, or they may have echolalia, where they're just repeating the ending of the sentence that's being asked of them. So they are having trouble with their executive functioning, where they're hearing words and they're giving back something to you, but they're not processing it where they can actually answer the question appropriately. Words are disappearing after they emerged. If a child learns new words, but the next day you ask them about something that, they had learned was green, and they keep saying red, or it seems like they just don't know that word anymore, that's a concern. Or relying on gestures only. Gesturing is a wonderful method of communication for an infant. If an infant is pointing at things and saying, they're communicating to you. They're demanding that they want the thing that's there, but they don't have the language to express it. So they're using their gestures. They can blink. They can point to things. They can take you by the hand to the item that they want. They're using gestures. But this is the one that parents notice first, but often gets dismissed with, we'll wait and see. Please don't wait. The earlier the intervention, the faster the progress. I always say there's no harm in starting sooner. If anything, if your child really doesn't need it so badly, they're just going to get ahead. So it's a win-win. There are behaviors driven by frustration. If your child is having meltdowns that feel bigger than the moment, or they're hitting, biting, and pushing, or they're shutting down, these aren't bad behaviors, but they're communication barriers and breakdowns that are happening because the child is struggling. And when the child wants to express themselves but they can't, the body begins to do it for them. So imagine being so frustrated because you want something to happen, but you can't, it's not happening. You're going to feel the same way, and it starts to come out in frustration or anger or attitude. So the same way, imagine being a small child and you don't know how to communicate that, plus you're lacking skills. Now you're going to start communicating with behaviors. Sensory red flags. If a child is covering their ears, avoiding textures, seeking movement constantly, like they're fidgety and they can't sit still, difficulty sitting at circle time, back to that fidgety, can't sit still, or crashing into things, that means they might need exterior additional stimulation where they're like moving, or if something's too loud, they're overstimulated, or they're needing that input. So when a child is struggling with sensory integration, the world feels too loud or too dull. And sensory needs are often one of the earliest signs that a child needs occupational therapy, OT, or integrated therapy like we do here at Kidology. Taking a quick break from the episode to share something close to my heart, I wrote a children's book and it's officially available for pre-order. It's called Bobo Wears a Bow Tie, and it's about a little character learning that growth doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be brave. If you're raising a child who's working hard, trying new things, or sometimes feeling unsure of themselves, this book was made for your family. Pre-order yours today at bobowearsabowtie.com. That's B-O-B-O wearsabowtie.com. All right, back to the episode. If they're socially disconnected, so they prefer to play alone all the time, they're not responding to their name, they have difficulty with taking turns, and they're showing limited eye contact or, shared experiences with other people or children. This doesn't automatically mean autism. I know most people will immediately think that, but it does mean that a deeper evaluation could be helpful so that you can understand what's happening. Feeding challenges. If a child is refusing entire textures and they're not even willing to look or try something, they're gagging easily. Yeah, that could mean they have a gag reflex, but often it's a choking situation because they tried something and the texture is not sitting well with them, so they're like they don't feel well. And rather than just getting through and maybe swallowing it, they may throw up, they may spit it out. Eating fewer than 10 foods, that's a concern, especially when you're hitting that 3.5 years old. Children have teeth and they should start being able to try new foods and textures. Anxiety around mealtime. They don't want to sit because they're going to feel like you're going to want to force them to try something new, and that usually doesn't end very well. Many parents think feeding issues are behavioral, but they're actually related to motor, sensory, or structure. So a feeding trained speech pathologist or occupational therapist would be essential here. A rigid routine or a difficult time transitioning. If a child is only wanting one specific cup, they're set on one cup. If you give them a different cup, it's a meltdown. That's a red flag. If they have a schedule change and they have to, acclimate to something different and they're not, that's a problem. Melting down over a schedule change shouldn't be such a difficult thing. And difficulty with stopping and starting activities. These are transitions that we want to nip in the bud early on. Life gets hard and challenging and things change. Things happen when you least expect it. So when you're small, it really shouldn't affect you at all. But if children are having difficulty with those things already, that would be a sign to come see a speech pathologist or a developmental specialist like myself. If a child presents with any of the things I just mentioned, that tells me there's an underlying regulation or a cognitive flexibility challenge. Totally addressable, but something that you should not ignore. motor concerns. So tripping frequently, avoiding climbing or playground equipment, having a weak core, a child who really can't sit or has difficulty being in a certain position, and poor handwriting. These are kiddos that often will need occupational or physical therapy, but they're rarely referred early enough unless a parent is advocating for them. So please don't miss getting the child the help that they need. And the big one, if your child seems different and you can't explain why. So this is where I look at every parent in the eye and I say, you don't need to explain anything. You just need someone who's going to listen to you. And if something feels off with your child, if you're feeling like your child is disconnected, or if the world just feels so much harder for them than it should, this is not a failure, but it is a sign. So get yourself evaluated. And I want to talk a little bit about why parents shouldn't wait. So as a clinician and a mom, I want to be very clear. Waiting is not something that will help you. Maybe mentally it feels like, it's going to make things no big deal. But in fact, you're going to make it worse by waiting. But supporting your child and starting sooner is always going to help. We see hundreds of children every month at Kidology, and progress skyrockets when the services begin early on. Kids don't grow out of struggles, but they absolutely grow through them with the right support. You don't need a diagnosis to get started. You don't need a teacher to flag it, and you don't need permission. You need to show up, and you need to get your child the help they deserve and the help that they need. What happens when you're seeking support? So at Kidology, and I can only speak for Kidology, at Kidology and in any good pediatric therapy model, here's what's actually going to happen when you reach out. So we listen first. There's no numbers and there's no checklist. We're listening to you. We want to hear the story. We want to hear what the child's doing, what the child's not doing. We want the background. We observe. We never judge. Every behavior that's happening with a child is a clue to them, their story, how to help them. Maybe we don't need to help them. Maybe we see them in 3 months from now. Maybe we see them in 6 months from now. But the idea is that you've seen something that you've identified as different, and we're here to help you work through it. We look at the whole child, their speech, their sensory, their motor capability, their regulation, your family dynamics, everything that they can and cannot do. And then we build a plan, a real plan with goals that make sense for the child and not someone else's child or chart or age norm, or it's based specifically on every individual client that comes in. And we support you because parents deserve tools. I'm a mom. I love nothing more than when I go somewhere and I feel supported, understood, and heard, and my child likes the doctor. That's the best. And this is why I advocate so hard for the families, because I live it. I live it every day as a mom, as a parent, and I've sat on both sides of the table, both professionally and personally, and because every child deserves a fighting chance at success. I say this every single time. Life is hard as it is, and it's even harder when you have a diagnosis or a difference. So we're here. I'm here. People like myself, speech language pathologist, family advocate, are here to help make life better when it's already challenging. I want to just give some encouragement for the parents. I want to end this episode for you with this. If you've been worrying quietly, if you felt dismissed by professionals, if people have told you that you're overreacting or don't worry about it, please hear me. You're allowed to advocate for your child. This is your child. You're allowed to question what's going on with them. You're allowed to get a second opinion. You're allowed to want more for your child, for their life. Your intuition is powerful, and your child deserves the best support. Not later, but right now. If this episode resonated with you, save it, share it with a friend, or send it to a parent who's been unsure. And if you're local to Philadelphia, Bucks County, or anywhere near our Kidology family, we're here for you always. I'm Luba Patlak. Thank you for listening to the Growth Lab podcast. And please remember, the earlier that we support children, the brighter their future will become. See you next time. Thanks so much for joining me here at the Growth Lab podcast. I really hope this episode was helpful. If it was, stick around for more episodes by subscribing to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you know a fellow parent that could use this episode, share it with them. Follow me on Instagram at Luba Patlak. That's LubaPatlakh for daily advice and resources to keep you informed between episodes. See you next time.